yerba mate?
Yeah, I love it.
It's so addicting.
It's great.
I'm totally coked up on caffeine right now.
It's way too, like, it's seriously caffeinated. It's like, I think it's like 250 milligrams or something.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it's insane.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, I gotta slow down, dude. I've had like tons of coffee today too.
How many of you had of those?
The yerba mate?
Yeah.
I had one, and then I had like a cup of coffee and cold brew already.
Wow, that's a lot. That's pretty significant.
Wow.
you're just gonna be bouncing off the walls.
Just in time for the episode. I'm probably stumbling over my words.
I know, right?
Talking like cartoon character or something.
Hello and welcome to Cinema Spectator, a show where an expert and a casual movie fan watch movies in the cinematic canon. Today's film is Mother, directed by Bong Joon Ho, starring Kim Hae-ja and Won Bin. My name is Cameron Tuttle, and I'm joined with Isaac Ransom. Isaac, you should keep that intro in there with you talking about caffeine, because how are you doing? Are you jacked up right now?
I am. Yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to sit still for this whole episode. It's weird. I didn't realize how much caffeine I thought it was just kind of like tea, but
no.
I guess yerba mate is like an energy drink or something.
Yeah, pretty much.
Excuse me. Sorry. Yeah, so I'm hyped up. Sorry if I'm checking my phone down below. I have a new full-time job, and I don't know what to do because we're recording this in the middle of the afternoon. I think it's fine because I clocked out to do it. It's weird working at home and then also clocking your hours. It's very stressful. I don't know, Cameron, you know, like the feeling from you going to like, because now you're doing videography kind of whenever you want to do it. There's like a freedom and flexibility in your work schedule. You still work hard, but there's something kind of liberating about it. Like, it's like I've gone in inverse because my old job was very like flexible and loose. And now it's like structured. Like I'm there at 9. The only times it's more loose is when I'm at home because I can clock in and out whenever I want. But it's like the shift gets spread out because it's like I can start and stop whenever, but also like then I'll be working till 8 because I'll just take breaks in between stuff. So I don't know. I've been waking up like extra early to start my shift and start working like so that I have the evening free. It's just this whole ordeal. I have no idea why I'm going on this tangent. Cameron, how's life, business, work, all that stuff going for you?
It's good. Yeah, like I mean, it is a lot of work. Like it is free, definitely, but like I feel like most of the days I'm kind of racking my brain, being like, okay, like I gotta send like 30 emails and like call people and like do, so it's like it's definitely fun, but that side of things can be a little stressful for sure. But yeah, I mean, I do get to set my own hours, so my hours are all the time.
That's the way I like it, but it's usually because you're doing something that you really enjoy, and then you're never like off work at all. And so it's, exactly. I don't know, like there's a part of me that's drawn to that. I think this job has some of that flexibility with it, with the work from home stuff. It's just I have to commute an hour into work, and those days are like you wake up at 7, you get to the office like at 9 because you still have to get ready. And then you leave the office at like 5:30. You're home at like 6:30. I'm like, dang, like it's just gone. And I guess that's what it is to be an adult and whatnot. So it's been interesting for me to transition into this and then see like how my free time is almost more focused or like sacrificed for doing things that I enjoy creatively. So like do this podcast or even the other day I was like, well, I can sit here and play Call of Duty for like 4 hours because I'm exhausted, or I can play my guitar, which I definitely need to practice. And so I played my guitar instead, and I gotta admit, it was pretty good. It was fun. I play like, you ever play and then like the sun's going down, and when you stop, like the sun is gone, you know? It was like, it was a cool moment just to be playing by myself. So I think for me personally, it's like I'm learning that the off time that I used to have, that I used to waste, is now so valuable to me that I'm starting to fill it with like things that are important to me. And as much as I like Call of Duty, that is going to be a lot less prevalent in my life now. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's been a neat transition. I don't mean to get too personal about it, but it's very fresh. It's this week. So yeah, that's the work life. But I'm glad to hear things are going well with your career stuff as well, Cameron. You know, in honor of this film that we're watching, and you're not allowed to use this film in this trivia question, Cameron and I have been introducing a new segment in this podcast where I ask Cameron, in his infinite movie knowledge, to name a movie that to answer a question about a movie. That's it. And we'll call it, trivia time. Here we go. So Cameron, without referencing this movie.
Oh, wait. It's not trivia though. This is just my opinions about
Yeah,
things.
it's just Cameron's opinion. We got to come up with a new name for this. Like some sort of like, I don't know. We'll come up with something good. Anyways, it's pretty straightforward. Cameron, which film has the greatest mother character that's not this one?
Yeah, interesting. I kind of knew that you were gonna ask this. So I was a little bit prepping. I want to say I feel like Bambi has the most impactful mother.
Oof. Wow.
maybe the gorilla in the mother gorilla in Tarzan as well. I think either of those could be pretty impactful. I'm sure there are others that are like on the other spectrum of like not necessarily good mothers. But I mean, yeah, I think those two are pretty good. Pretty good options. So
yeah, it's interesting because when I thought of this question, I was thinking to myself, like, why is it that I can only think of animated movies? I think there's something about mothers that, you're obviously so attached to your own, hopefully in the time of your life when you're growing up, right? That in that time frame, you're watching cartoon films and the mother characters also resonate with you and they stick with you in some sort of regard. So for me, I was like, this it's kind of a funny answer now because of all the memes, but I was like, oh, Mrs. Incredible. She was like the best mother character because as a kid, there's obviously a lot of jokes about Mrs. Incredible being extra thick and all that online. But as a kid, right? Like for me personally, I was like, oh, this is a female, like an older female character that's a mother that's also kind of cool. Like there was something about her that wasn't obnoxious, whereas like other mother characters are almost like two-note figures that were like, oh, I'm just this guiding, caring mother, or I'm a angry, abusive mother that hates my princess daughter or something like that, right? Where even as a kid, I was able to recognize that like Mrs. Incredible had complexity to her motivations and she's independent. I always love that scene where she like sneaks on the island by herself and like she's like riding the back of the like little ball car and she becomes a parachute. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
That scene in movie is so awesome. So yeah, that's my own pick for it. But anyways, this is Cinema Spectator. You can support us at patreon.com/ECFS Productions. Throw a couple dollars our way. Get access to a commentary track or an exclusive episode each month. Have your questions read on air. Maybe even influence the question that I prod Cameron with each episode from now on moving forward. You have that ability, Patrons. I'm telling you. Message us on Patreon. If you don't have a few dollars, it's all good. You can give us a rating on iTunes, tell friends and family. That is how the show grows. We're starting off talking about mothers because this movie is all about a mother. Cameron, lead us into it.
Yeah, so this movie is Bong Joon Ho's Mother. Came out sort of festival circuit 2009, but general release in 2010. And so this was his fourth feature film. Before this, he made a movie called The Host, which is kind of a monster flick. I actually haven't seen it. It's one of the few of his I haven't seen, but it's more of sort of a straightforward kind of action horror movie. And then before that, he made a movie which I think is most similar to this movie called Memories of Murder. We might end up visiting it. I love that movie too, but I think this, in my mind, is actually his best movie. And Bong Joon Ho is kind of an interesting character because he is someone who obviously got huge critical acclaim and commercial success in 2019 with his movie Parasite. It obviously won for Best Picture, and so that kind of thrust him into the mainstream. But before this, his career has kind of been a series of hit after hit. Memories of Murder, Mother. Well, and The Host was actually very successful as well. Mother, and then after this, he made Snowpiercer, which is his first like English language movie, and is also very excellent. I'd highly recommend it. And then he made Okja and Parasite. So all of them kind of internationally well acclaimed, internationally recognized. And what I want to bring to this discussion and talk a little bit about is what some people have called, or what I refer to as sort of the Korean New Wave, or Korean New Cinema. And he's kind of one of the big players and kind of the pioneer of modern Korean cinema. And one of the interesting things about him, I would say, is his style is kind of it's extremely shocking in a lot of ways, but it's also very heartfelt and unique. He has a very distinct visual style. It's very odd. He kind of puts you in weird perspectives, and that way it kind of steps you outside of what you sort of normally used to in what might be somewhat conventional movies. I think Snowpiercer and Okja and Parasite not so much, but Memories of Murder and Mother are pretty conventional, sort of straightforward detective movies in a lot of ways. And he has a really unique ability to turn something familiar into something that is very strange and disturbing. And I think this movie is just the perfect example of it. Taking someone's mother and making it, disturbing in a lot of ways. So that's kind of my initial. And just to preface, we will be doing Korean New Cinema for this month. It's kind of one of my favorite modern genres, and it's a good balance of international cinema and relatable and sort of interesting films that are engaging and not alienating like some foreign films are. And so I think for you, Isaac, this is a good example to kind of step outside of your comfort zone a little bit, but still be engaged, I would say. So so we'll be doing doing all Korean language movies for the next couple of weeks.
I'm really excited to explore this genre because I know that you have high opinions about it. I didn't know what exactly to expect. Just to kind of give some background, Cameron told me that Korean cinema is the cinema of extremes before I began watching this. Now, we were going to watch another movie that we may or may not still watch for this month. And so maybe he was referencing that movie more than this one with that kind of statement. But I really was kind of nervous going into it, and I was pretty pleasantly surprised like after the credits began. I think this movie really does transcend being foreign in some ways. I think that it's really approachable, surprisingly, and quite entertaining. If you go in expecting something really different, I think you'll actually find a lot to like. And that's how I went into this film, right? Because most of my experience with foreign film has been, some French cinema that Cameron showed me, and I've absolutely hated that. I don't know if hate is a strong word, but most of it is not my cup of tea, right? Whereas this, almost from the get-go, I was like, oh, I'm more about like this feel and this style and kind of like being in your face in some ways, but also like it felt like a good mesh of introducing some of the Korean culture and style in a film while also obviously looking to Hollywood and what the United States has been doing to create its own like perfect balance. Whereas I think French cinema, because it has so much history from what you've told me about, right, is almost clashing or trying to separate itself from American cinema, right? In maybe in some ways, I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, but something about this movie felt more like it loved American cinema, but it was going to do it its own way. Where most French films I've watched seem like it's just going to do it its own way. Period. You know what I mean?
And there's a disdain for American cinema in a lot of French circles, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was very surprising for me. I think that it's not a perfect movie, but there's so much to dissect and dive into. I'm genuinely like surprised by it, Cameron. So I'm excited to talk to you about it. Do you want me to get into the plot, or you want to summarize the plot without spoiling anything?
Yeah, we can get into the plot, but I will say just quickly, it is kind of interesting. I mean, obviously we were supposed to watch Old Boy, so spoilers, we're going to watch it, either next week or the week after. I'll have to decide, but, it's kind of interesting because Old Boy obviously came first, but, this movie I do think is kind of a better introduction for you in some ways. Not going to say much about that, but, but this movie is like you said, it's like very approachable, and it's pretty fun. I would say it kind of keeps you locked in from the get go. So yeah, why don't you sort of give us a little bit of the plot? I would say stay far away from certain things, but yeah.
So the story revolves around this mother that has a son who's kind of like, mentally challenged. He's not fully there. He's definitely either like he's just challenged in some ways, and a lot of people call him a bunch of mean names throughout the movie, right? So she's kind of overprotective of him, and he has a friend that's a little bit rougher and knows the streets a little bit better, and some things pursue where her son almost like unknowingly gets involved in things that get him in trouble, right? And his mother, being the overprotective mother that she is, pursues justice for her son and trying to help him get out of the trouble he's in. That's probably the best way I can put it without saying too much more. But you understand that there's a strong dynamic and bond between someone who is very helpless, innocent, and kind of like, overprotected in a lot of ways, with a mother character who is extremely sympathetic for her son, but almost to a fault. And she is like almost anything he does, even from the first scene in the movie, like he's just hanging out on the street, right? She's just freaking out about it, right? So there's a very neat dynamic that's very relatable, I think, in many different ways for a bunch of people. I just feel like the setup is like, oh, you get it from the get-go. It's in a different language, it's in a different culture, but right away you're like, I understand what's going on, right? You don't even need the subtitles, to be honest. And I think that's what's so excellent about the setup. And so a bunch of chaos ensues, but there's a lot of mystery and trying to figure out, who did what and who's responsible for certain things. So that some of the adventure that comes with trying to discover some of these mysteries reminded me of kind of the switch and drama of Gone Girl, which is probably the closest drama I can compare this to with my limited movie scope, right? But it seemed like it has a like visceral energy of like constantly keeping you on your toes, like what's going to happen next? Like, was it this or that? And so hopefully I'm kind of summarizing the feeling and a little bit of the plot so you understand what this movie is all about. Do you have anything to add, Cameron?
No, I think actually Gone Girl is a good example. Maybe not thematically, but it's a good sort of, if it relates in some ways to sort of the feeling of mystery that you have as an audience member. And then also on top of that, when you go back, it kind of more things are revealed, sort of the more you learn about these characters too. So
yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, just in terms of sort of before we get into major spoilers, just in terms of sort of the filmmaking and the craftsmanship of this movie, it's obviously fairly low budget, I would say. Although in international films, it's hard to gauge actually what low budget is. I don't know. It's especially considering different time periods, but I think you can kind of tell like it's a little bit lower budget. There's definitely a lot of characters and a lot of settings, but for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. There's not like a ton of, special effects or anything like that. It's just very focused on the characters, and sort of the drama in revealing that. And I would say it leans most heavily on the suspense element of certain things. The suspense of certain characters getting into, different situations, revealing information in a similar way that I think Fincher does in a lot of his movies, where the deeper you go, the more the more things are revealed in sort of character, uh, in these small character moments. I'm reminded of the scene in the carousel. Remember, or in the what's it called?
I think you got it.
Carousel?
Merry-go-round, but I'm pretty sure it's a carousel.
I don't know.
What's the difference?
I think a merry-go-round is the one that goes like this. Right?
Whoa, what's a No, that's definitely a carousel. Because I used to work at that railroad thing as a young high schooler. That's definitely a carousel. I think you're thinking of a Ferris wheel.
Ferris wheel. That's yeah. Okay, yeah. The scene in the Ferris wheel where they there's certain things revealed about a character's cell phone, and that reveals information about who that character was, and so it reminds me of the way Fincher develops characters based on the information he lays out, and I think it's surprisingly effective at wrapping you into, or like leaning you into this story, and not giving you all the answers until sort of a critical moment. And then when that moment happens, there's almost like, oh wow, everything that you've learned up to this point sort of changes deeply. And I think it's really effective in like cranking up small bits of tension to get to that one bigger release. And that one release, I would say, which is kind of the linchpin of the movie, is it works extremely well in my mind. And I think part of that has to do with obviously how it's written, but partly because the filmmaking is so on lock. Like it reminds me of there's a great video essay by Every Frame of Painting, which I don't know if you've watched this one, Isaac. But there's an awesome episode on this movie where he talks about sort of how things are revealed in profile shots, where they're important information is hidden based on what type of shot the characters are. So there's a red herring that happens with him facing the front of the camera, but most of the important plot points are actually in sort of this profile shot, and that's how you can kind of guide yourself by looking towards how how the filmmaker actually positions things. So I don't know, in my mind it's kind of it's pretty virtuosically made, and just as a stripped down detective movie, I think it works so well because really what you want in those movies is a straightforward plot and really good filmmaking to back it up, and that's why something like Silence of the Lambs or something like that is so effective, because the filmmaking works really well, and I think this movie totally does that as well. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about about that, or just just the visuals in general. I think are excellent. But
Yeah, I think from the opening moments of the movie, there's a clear control over the camera and its attention to like framing and beauty. I think this movie is really pretty.
yeah,
I found that most shots were just entertaining to look at and watch, even if like I don't know. I think that's what really helped it be approachable as well, because even if I didn't like feel as super engaged with the dialogue because of the language barrier and there's translation, there's so much happening with the framing and the camera work. Every scene is really like really gorgeous. And it's strange because I think about small character moments like when they're at that like I don't know why I'm thinking about like the young girls like at the cell phone shop and she gets the nosebleed. Like that
mm,
entire scene is like so it's focused on dialogue and you're learning a little bit more about the girl with the cell phone, right? It's just like everything in that kind of mundane moment is like cranked up to 11 because of the way that the camera moves and that there's so much like intention behind the framing. And then it ends with her face, like a really like hard close up of her face, and you can see her eyes almost like shining, and the blood is coming down. It's like, whoa, like this is just it's out there, and it looks great doing it. So I don't have much else to say about the technical stuff until we kind of go through the characters and some of the, I guess, some of the event moments that have really well crafted setups. Like there's a dark alleyway that's really cool, I think, that I want to talk about. But yeah, overall, I think this movie is super super pretty.
yeah,
Yeah,
I agree. Well, and the nosebleed thing comes back. It's well, I guess this is kind of a great segue into the the plot and the writing of things, because that is an amazing reveal sort of towards the end of the movie, that uh, is just kind of very lightly placed in a totally unrelated scene, and it comes back to be sort of a again part of the linchpin of the movie.
right.
um and it's awesome. It works so well, and it takes you off guard, I would say. But yeah, let's say from here on out, I think we're almost like halfway through the podcast. So from here on out, spoilers abound. Just, I would say, watch the movie for sure.
Yeah,
I highly recommend this movie to everybody. I think it's super approachable, super easy to engage with, and is fun and interesting, and underrated in my mind. So
I think it's just the right amount of weird foreignness for someone who's more casual and not ready to venture into that. I think this is a great starting point. I didn't feel, I mean, with my limited knowledge of film and a little bit of like background and training from Cameron, right? Like I could have watched this 6 months ago and probably enjoyed it too.
yeah,
So I think that goes a long way with this film. But yeah, I do want to talk about the plot and the characters a little bit more in depth. I don't know if we're gonna like really spoil every single reveal and walk through it like very linearly, but I just didn't. I wanted to cover ourselves. Watch this movie. Don't ruin the fun part of the mystery, which some of you will. Tim Smith probably. But yeah, it's worth watching. But let's start with Mother as a character. What, I don't even know what her name is besides Mother.
just
So
Mother.
we're
Yeah.
just gonna call her Mother. Yeah, she is. She's a difficult character in my opinion, and I'm surprised how well like she works in this film, because there's something about her that is not very like well, not very likable, right? I don't know what
Yeah.
it is, but then at the same time, you're rooting for her, and she is the main character, right?
Mhm.
And I think that setting up a character like this is probably underappreciated, because it's not like they're a villain or a criminal, right? Or at least on the
What?
outward look, right? On the outside, they almost seem like the background character that shouldn't be the main character in the film. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And it's sort of it's sort of like special to me. I can't think of the right way to phrase this, but like that she is such a blank, mysterious slate, just like the mystery that you're trying to figure out, right? There's
Yeah.
almost a like a mystery unraveling about her character at the same time, where the mystery is unraveling at the same moment, and it creates like this cool like thing where you're watching two things unravel, and it's not overwhelming. Like, it's because that's such a character focused mystery versus a, like, you know, larger criminal mystery, right? Like, I don't know. I think it's epic. I don't think I've seen a movie that does something like this in the way that I guess because I've been thinking about Gone Girl, right? And it seems like Ben Affleck's character in that movie, although I don't remember if he's really like, it's been a long time since I've seen that, but he seems more flat, like almost just the observer of the mystery unfolding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Mother is not that. She is
No.
a active
She's
participant.
active. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
An active participant in the mystery that's unfolding, but she is also like evolving in the audience's eyes at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's like there's almost like two things happening at once.
Well, and I love the fact that I think that's an awesome way to put it, that there's sort of two mysteries unraveling at the same time. I think that's so true. But I love the fact that she, as the protagonist, is the one who's sort of actively investigating things, actively, putting herself into these situations. And, to your point that she's not necessarily likable, but you are rooting for her. I think that's the reason why, because you understand her motivation, right? It's to clear her son's name of this murder, or at the very least, no, actually, it's just to clear her son's name. It's not necessarily, even as we find out, to figure out what the truth is, which, if you were following like the detective or whatever else, that might be the sort of point of getting to the bottom of the murder mystery. But in this movie, it's kind of a twist on that formula where she's really just trying to exonerate her son. And so you get her motivation, and you get her, where she's coming from, and she's not the observer. She is completely taking the story, by the reins, and she's the one who's sort of actively, moving things along, while everybody else is kind of just sitting there and observing. And I think it's so enjoyable to watch because, whether or not you necessarily agree with what she's doing, you gotta appreciate her for sort of having a goal and trying to achieve it. I guess like those characters are always compelling in some ways. So even if she is introduced as overbearing and sort of out of touch in a lot of ways, and kind of weirdly just like weirdly hovering over her son and whatever else, like all of these things are true, and you're introduced to her in that way, but you also you want to follow her to see where she goes, and I don't think it disappoints. I think it really it takes a turn that you don't necessarily anticipate, or at least I didn't. And I think it's a lot of fun, I would say. But
yeah, I think of another movie like Knives Out, where Daniel Craig's the investigator, but he basically doesn't do anything. He just watches everybody crazy. He watches everybody that push, like, it's almost an inverse structure where the lead character is just sitting back and letting all the active characters reveal the mystery, right? And to think that someone thought, well, I'm going to design a mystery almost in inverse, right? And, you know, like, even to go as far as like with spoilers, where like it's almost like the active participants are the heart of the mystery, or to blame for the criminality aspect, I guess, or whatever, right? Like it's almost like if, and this is how I felt about it, it's almost like if the murderer was trying to figure out his own murder. Do you know what I mean? And it's not that Mother is guilty for the crime that's committed, but she is the most guilty in the scene, right? Or at the end of the movie, she is the one that is the most like immorally. She's immorally compromised. Like she's just the worst person at the end of the movie, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And also, you know, but again, this is why she's such an interesting character, because she's the most morally compromised, but also she doesn't care, because that's not the point of her. You know, she doesn't care about, you know, what's happened, because she wants her son to be free. And she has no, you know, there are no other options but for her son to be free in her mind. And that's why she's, I mean, you got to admire her in some ways. As she's such a, she ends up being sort of a very villainous character, but she also is, you see her be extremely capable, I guess, is what I'll say about that. But
right. Yeah, she's I don't know. It's almost like her structure has I'm trying to think of like almost like an end all be all, right? Which is pretty simple, but it becomes complex when she's faced with clearly moral problems, right? Because her end response of seeing the other guy go to jail, right? Like that's like a very traumatic moment, you know? That's like
and it's super cold too.
Yeah. And then it's almost like I mean, I hated her more because it was like she's crying, but it doesn't matter. Like she still did the wrong thing, you know?
Right. Yeah, whatever. She knows it's wrong and she did it anyways. And she, you know, it's almost like she's exchanging someone else's position, or, you know, she's exchanging her position for someone else, you know? And it's like, it's pretty brutal. Like you can see that she, her thought process is, do you have a mom? You know what I mean? Like, and that's, you're like, geez, like the only thing that you're thinking of, she doesn't care about him, obviously. Like she doesn't care that he's going to jail. The only thing she can think of is, what if I put another mother into the same position? You know what I mean? Like that's brutal. There's an element of coldness in that is, it cuts deep, but it's also because I think it's like there's a reality in there.
Yeah,
I think people do exchange other people's positions for their own, for sure.
Right. It's almost like she's trying to like justify the cost, right? Because if he had a mother, then that connection could exist, which is the most valuable connection to her above all things, right? But because he doesn't, well, then it's worth it, you know?
Yeah.
But, you know, I think she's obviously moved in that moment. I couldn't understand. I thought he said, yes, he did have a mother. That's why she responded the same way. That's why she responded with tears. But I
think he shakes his head. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
It wasn't clear to me. So either way, I think it's still impactful. Like she's emotional, but the way I saw the ending, and I probably just didn't understand it, is that he did say yes, and so she got really emotional. And then the scene before the bus, it's like the icing on the cake with her son being like, oh, like I found this box, the acupuncture box, also like tripling her guilt in that moment. And her response in all of that is like, I think the ending is crazy. I think the ending of this movie is also like, can we just say for a second, like the reveal or the moment that she had been talking about the entire film with like forgetting with the acupuncture thing is finally like, it finally comes forward in the last moments of the movie. And then just to have that wild camera shot outside the bus with them dancing at like golden hour, I was like, what is even happening right now? But it's funny.
Awesome. It's awesome.
And I also think that the music in that moment, because music is really important to me in film, the score comes forward in such a powerful way where it's happy. I think it goes from, it's like major, and then there's like this sustained like minor for a second, right? Like there's a feeling of like uneasiness that's presented about, you know, probably like 65%. Like if the scene had a loading bar, like 65% of that dancing scene, right? So it's like over halfway, you're just watching them dancing. Suddenly the major positive sounding score switches to like this like mysterious like minor chord that's like, wait a second, like obviously you're uncomfortable in the entire scene, but it's like, yay, we're happy. But then there's like this hinting moment of like mystery in the score back into like positivity, and then the credits roll. Like I think that's such a powerful way that the composer was making that scene like forget all your problems, but then there's this underlying like hauntingness of like, you can forget all you want, but we're not, like the audience doesn't forget, right?
Yeah.
And there's something moral that won't be forgotten too, right?
And it's a beautiful song too, just in general, you know. It's a wonderful song. And you're right, like as an ending, you know, it has this sort of the structure of being sort of happy, and then after that sustained chord there's the build of it changing keys into another sort of major section with know, with strings and whatever else. And it's awesome. It's it's really, really good. And I love that scene on the bus because, like you said, and this is what I'll say about the writing is like, it's so neat, like tightly woven, I guess. There's so much that comes back around, you know. Obviously there's that scene again after he's out of jail where she's cutting the herbs, you know, and it kind of plays out in a very similar manner. And you know, it's just awesome. Like there's so many callbacks from earlier in the film that come back, you know, like the nosebleed thing where, you know, that's the reason why they found blood on the guy's shirt, you know, the guy who is actually but not actually the killer. They found blood on his shirt, but it's because she had chronic nosebleeds. So you know, and all of these things that you learn along the way, they come back to just make, you know, to cement Mother as this very heartless person who will just do anything for her son. And yeah, I think it works so well. Like like you said, the acupuncture sequence where, where she's, you know, that reveal of her, putting it into her thigh, to forget is just awesome. It's so good. And such a perfect ending to the story, I think. So.
Yeah. She is definitely the star of the show. She steals a lot of kind of, I don't know. Like it was a strange audience experience because I didn't like, there was a part of me that wanted to bring up Mrs. Incredible at the beginning of this, right? Because there's something about her being a mother character that is fascinating. You're rooting for her. She is also kind of uncovering a mystery that you maybe know a little bit more about in The Incredibles because you've seen, Bob's perspective in that film, right? But there's something about her that is fun to watch and also like pleasant. Like there's something good, but there's something about Mother that she is like she demands your attention on screen, and you are so invested and bought into seeing what happens with her. But man, she's bad. You really like she is not good. Like that's just
yeah.
I don't know what it is. I was that it was almost like a not frustrating experience, but like I didn't want the movie to be about her. I like too many of the other side characters that are interesting and almost they're more moral and they're good. It's like I want to see more of them, but it's like you just can't help but watch. And I think it's excellently put together. If I were watching it and making a movie, or if I was making this film, it would be hard for me to have a focus on a character like that just because I don't want to watch a character like that. But it doesn't take away from that's just my own subjective thing. Like she is a monster that you are just, she's a monster that you want, like you have to see what happens with, right? Almost like the same, like I know this is a really strange comparison, but it's like when you watch a Godzilla movie, right? Like that's a monster that is, there's obviously not a moral side, but it's like you're there to watch the monster, And I think Mother's the same way. You're there to watch the monster that you don't even know is the monster. I don't know if that makes sense, but do you kind of see what I'm saying? Where it's like, personally, it's like I don't care about Godzilla. I don't even really want to watch Godzilla when I watch a Godzilla movie, but he's the focus. And I think this movie's the same, where it's like you don't want to watch her, but you have to, and that's what the movie's all about. And it's even written on the poster like Godzilla, and it's like you just you just have to experience it, and it's a trip, She's I don't know. I think I'm rambling at this point, but yeah.
Well, and it doesn't help that she wins too.
Yeah.
It makes things even more uncomfortable. She wins and she forgets about it. Like that's she wins and there's no consequences for her necessarily. And that's why, obviously I think the movie's very clear in that it's not endorsing what's happened, but she's very, she's put in a position where, everything lines up just perfectly for her. And it's kind of with devastating effect too. And in a way that would, potentially just repeat the behavior, right? Because, in the sequence that we, that reveals what actually happened with the murder, you see another theme that has played out, over and over again through the movie. That first sequence is in the police station where, one of the professors, I think, calls him the R word,
right?
And he attacks him in the police station, and then there's that conversation afterwards where, basically it's revealed that that's her fault that he does that,
right?
He says,
for every one punch I throw two, right?
Yeah, yeah, and he says you said don't let people don't let people insult me. Um and so even in the reveal of that of what happened, it all comes back to her in the end.
Yeah.
And and obviously like he being set up as kind of the well, I guess let's move on to him now.
Yeah.
I think what's his name? Do Jun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's an interesting character too, because obviously it's revealed that he, again, spoilers for this section. Obviously it's revealed that he, is the murderer.
Mm-hmm.
Although you kind of get a sense that there was not a lot of thought about it. It was very much just a reaction, and one sort of single reaction. And then at the same time, him being set up as kind of a character with mental handicaps, there's not a ton of blame necessarily on him. And I actually think the lawyer probably has maybe the better perspective of saying like, hey, like, let's get him into a hospital, and instead of him doing, like 15 years to life, he'll just do, a couple of years at a hospital and, chalk it up to that and whatever else.
Right.
Which probably is, maybe the best answer for everybody. But at the same time, it does on the face of it. And this is why, again, I think it's written so interestingly, is it's kind of written for you to assume that he's totally innocent. It's written for you to assume that he's just being framed because of the golf ball, and, there's no evidence or whatever else. Another interesting side note on this is, the scene where they reenact the murder.
Right.
Apparently, this is a common thing. Not necessarily common, but this is actually a thing done in South Korea, where people, when they confess to a murder, they will do like a reenactment with the murderer.
Wow.
Which is crazy to me. I think it's super interesting. And it's funny because the only two movies that I know that have that are two Bong Joon Ho movies. It's Memories of Murder and Mother. So it's kind of a recurring thing for him, I would say. And I would say, again, totally a criticism of the practice in my mind. This is like, in both of those movies, it's like pretty humiliating for everybody involved. And also, like, yeah, the interesting thing about that scene, and how it comes back later, is when he's talking to Mother and he says, like, it's almost as if, the murderer wanted people to see, and didn't know what to do and wanted people to like come get help. And he's not saying that from his own perspective. And that's what I think, again, makes him kind of an interesting character, is he doesn't have that much culpability in my mind.
He's designed with not just a mental disability, but also a problem with like memory. Like he can't remember stuff very well. So that helps add to the mystery, because it's not that he's stupid, right? It's that he has a hard time remembering on top of his disability, right? Which I thought was really effective, because it's like his character still has, like, he's not just a potato, right? Like he's functioning. He has a human side. He has this like, I'm here right now, but I'm having a hard time remembering anything else, right? And so I think he's very innocent, obviously, because, you feel bad for him with his disability, and he has like a childlike innocence with the way he, follows around his friend, and You know, he kind of goes about, and his introduction is really goofy because at first you don't really realize that he has sort of a mental problem, but he's kind of comes across like a doofus, like at the golf in the golf course, right, where he
Mhm.
tries to kick the mirror and he messes it up, right, and it's pretty funny, and then he's suddenly collecting golf balls and you're like, what's this guy doing? For a while I didn't even realize that he had a problem because I was like, maybe this is just like, I don't know, maybe it's just some humor or something I don't understand because it's a foreign film. But no, like it becomes clear as people begin to insult his character and everything. And but I think something about that initial introduction with him makes you realize that from the outside, like he's just kind of like this innocent figure, right? I think his reveal with the murder is so awesome. Like I think it is just super chilling. The way that the camera is inside that building where the witness is in
Mhm.
too, and that moment where he's like he clearly is having like a cognitive breakdown because he doesn't know what to do. So
Yeah,
he like
yeah.
keeps flipping open his phone. Like that scene is like your gut just drops, you know? You're like, "Oh my goodness. Like what is even happening right now?" You know? Just like I think that is the climax of realizing that although he appeared somewhat normal at the beginning, he clearly needs a little bit of help, more than you thought at the beginning of the film. So he has his evolution as a character throughout the film is realizing how intense his disability is and how much help he needs, where he almost kind of tricked you at the beginning of the film, right? But you still don't blame him because he's like not only being manipulated by his mother, and he also has like that there's that conversation about how he remembers things when he gets beat up, and he's like, you tried to kill me when I was 5. Like
Yeah.
there's almost like a touch of like maybe this kid was intelligent at one point, you
Or
know?
normal, yeah, and yeah, that's kind of the I think the movie's kind of hinting in some ways that part of his disability was, you know, like she was responsible for that.
Right, right.
Well, and then also, I don't know what you make of this, but in my mind, it's kind of strange that that moment that she says like, "Oh, take this route and like you'll get pregnant from it," like it happened to me. And there's never talk of like any father in the picture. You don't see anything like that. So like, I don't know I mean, I'm not sure what to make of it personally, but like, uh, I don't know. Do you think it's implying that like somehow that was connected to his disability as well? I don't know. It could be sort of another hint at the background.
Well, I think that the director of this movie is trying to comment on things outside of the scope of this film's plot and kind of just function. You know, I kept feeling like this movie was trying to symbolically show something or explain something, but I'm just too dumb to understand it or realize what's happening. And so there are all these moments throughout the movie from the beginning of like her initial introduction in the field of like showing all this emotion. It's almost like she's showing off her emotional range as an actress, which is just such a strange way to start the movie. I was like, is this something that like I just don't understand about this other culture, right? That they introduce their lead actress with some sort of like scene to show off, like an opening dance or something like that, you know? Um,
No, this is
to
very unique in this movie,
Yeah,
and it's connected obviously to the end. That's kind of
yeah,
more than anything.
and I saw it. Like it obviously comes back around, right? But I kept feeling like there is a underbelly of Korean culture shown with some of the poverty and like the rough streets and the kids in these nice uniforms, but everybody else kind of being like, you know, in this very jam-packed rural area, and there's clearly abuse of alcohol shown throughout the movie. And so I don't really and even like the way that the police are represented, like they're very goofy, like, oh, we haven't had crime in so long out here and stuff. Like I feel like there's a lot of things being commented about the culture uh, in this movie that is just so beyond me. And
Hmm.
also, there's a translation barrier as well, right? There are some, um, you know, for instance, like you said, like they keep calling him the R word, right? Which, you know, in American culture, to call somebody that is quite offensive. I don't know what word that exactly is in the Korean language, right? And sort of the connotation behind it. Maybe it's worse than like than
Yeah,
our
it
thought
could be.
of
Yeah.
what it is, or maybe it's not as bad, right? And that would really change the way that the son's character is, like in a lot of ways too, right? So yeah, I felt like there was this layer that the director is trying to comment on in this movie that is beyond me in my first viewing. And I was actually going to ask you about it, Cameron. Like, are there things that, or do you know of anything that he's like trying to comment on from sort of the, I don't know. There's almost like there's a side conversation about, you know, an all girls school and a boys school and like the toxic relationship that they have with female students and male students, and kind of like the impropriety that's happening between both parties. And I don't know, like I
And
just felt like there
I
was
think
so
like I think cyberbullying and that kind of like early conversation about that leads
yeah.
into it. But I would say mostly, what I pick up from this movie, and it's kind of similar to Memories of Murder in a lot of ways, is kind of how easily sort of the system is able to manipulate people who are powerless otherwise. Especially going from the reveal of him actually being the murderer, and but you thinking um for the most of the movie that he was just framed, to them finding the actual not real murderer, who is he clearly has Down syndrome. And like that's another it's another layer of that character where um I think there's an element that I think he's talking a lot about, how people can just be railroaded into these situations, especially when they don't have anybody to stick up for them, and especially the fact that did you ever watch like Making a Murderer?
No.
Well, that documentary has a lot of similar things to say, where people were made to sort of confess in a way that was probably improper. And you know there's a certain amount of manipulation that goes into that. And I think this movie, it doesn't talk so much about the manipulation of the police necessarily, and it talks more about sort of how the system is able to kind of um, ram people into these situations. But Memories of Murder is interesting because it's very directly focused on sort of how how people are falsely accused, and how people can use that to their advantage to take to sort of get out of their own guilt. And so so I think this movie specifically is talking a little bit about the maybe some of the injustices of the justice system. And
Yeah, there's a oh, go ahead. Sorry.
well, I would say, like, I think there's it's obviously Korea specific, and the movie is Korean. It takes place in Korea, but I think there are certain elements of the movie that can be universally applied. So
The film also goes out of its way to make sure that there are basically like there's barely any parents in this film.
Mhm.
And all the kids that get in trouble or are like they basically are just completely disconnected from parents. The only
Yeah.
girl that has parents is like the parents that like run the restaurant that the son gets like that passes out in, those are some parents. but like the girl who's murdered her, she is taking care of her drunken grandma, right?
Yeah.
The kid who ends up going to prison doesn't have any parents at all. You know, there's almost like, it's almost like Mother is the complete extreme opposite of everyone else, where it's like, maybe it's even going as far as like, this is like how important it is for kids to have parents in some way. Like there's like this disgusting translation you can pull from that or something, where it's like, you know, all these other kids are getting in trouble and getting killed and all this stuff. But it's like the kid that has a overprotective, you know, even crazy parent gets away with it all, you know? I don't know. Like there's just so many things about the culture that are being commented on in this film that are beyond my scope of knowledge, right? And I don't know. Like I was just kind of curious to ask you about it, if you knew anything that was pulled away in, I guess, the Korean, like, because obviously Korean people like watch this movie and are probably dissecting it in their own special way, right? Because they have a deeper understanding of it.
Yeah,
So,
I definitely don't have any special perspective in that sense. You know, I'm not Korean, but I do think most of what the movie is can be taken universally. And I don't think it really necessarily, like, of course there are certain cultural elements to the movie, but I think for the most part, you know, it universally applies in my mind. But
yeah. Yeah, and then there's a bunch of other like side characters as well, that like the son's friend, who's kind of interesting. For a second you think he's the person that framed him or is the murderer, but then it kind of turns out that he's this cool street cop or something. Like he keeps saying like, I should have been a cop, and there's that great scene with the gosh, now
Ferris
I can't
wheel.
think of it. Ferris wheel, where he's interrogating him, and he's this imposing figure throughout the movie. What did you think of his character, Cameron? He's obviously a supporting role, but then he has like a strange side plot with him.
Yeah, I like his character a lot. I mean, he's, you know, introduced very early in the movie, basically the first scene, as kind of a bad, I mean, in some ways a bad influence. In some ways, you know, he does stick up for his friend in a weird way. You know, he's kind of there to I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Like you can see that he in some ways cares about his friend, but also, you know, they get into shenanigans, which I guess, you know, that's pretty accurate to real life. But then of course, like, you know, there's that great scene where she's hiding in the closet, which is like so tense.
Yeah.
And then, you know, she pulls out she's got her gloves on and she pulls out the golf club, and
which is awesome. Like it's like you think you understand what's happening in that scene, but you'd have no idea. And
yeah,
it's also kind of a random, like, I don't know, just, you know, romance scene that happens. I was like, okay, all right. So, but yeah, it is intense, right? When she's hiding in there.
Well, and then with the girl, that's the girl from the
right, which is like
bar.
Disturbing too. I'm like, I'm so confused about.
Yeah, which has another, you know, there's another little layer, and it's obviously a red herring, but it's another little layer into that, where that sequence where you're like, oh, he's like, you know, he's like with the girl from the bar that night, and like maybe they were like kind of in on it together or something, or like you don't really know what's going on. So like, yeah, there's like another layer that kind of is just a red herring, but it's fun to think about when you're there. You know, and then he does turn around to be, obviously he kind of extorts her a little bit, so you know, he's not like a great guy or anything, but he turns out to be sort of on her side in some ways, and helps her reveal certain things about the victim. And I think the victim is probably the next person we should talk about, because she has, again, another important range of, almost like her mystery unravels along with the movie, in a way that's like a little bit sad and touching in some ways. You know, she's obviously trying to take care of her grandma, and it's revealed, you know, she's doing this through you know, sex work, and she's doing this kind of as a, you know, almost like you know, she keeps a list of guys in her phone, and you know, she, you know, there's reveals along that line. But I think she, you know, for someone who's basically not on screen, she has like a really interesting trajectory in your mind that I didn't expect, you know, first going into this movie.
Right, you don't even know who she is at the beginning, and then like the movie is all fun and kind of goofy and not really serious up until the moment where what's the son's name? I can't remember. I can't. It's like
Do Jun, I think.
Yeah, something like that. He's like walking in that alleyway and he's following this girl, and it's very weird because like he just was talking about how he liked the other girl that's dating his friend, but you don't know that yet, right? Like she comes into the restaurant, he's stumbling home, right? And that alleyway just there's something about it. I commented when I was watching it because I watched it with Jules, and I was like, oh, like this kind of tense horror, like it reminds me a lot of like Resident Evil or even like the PT demo or something, where there's a corner, right? You're turning around the corner, and then there's like a doorway or an alleyway that's so dark and you just can't see in there. And there's something about it that feels like it reminded me of a lot of different Eastern like media that I've seen that has horror elements. And I was like, this is so cool. Like I love this scene. Like it is, you have no idea what's happening, and then the rock flying out, you're like, what is there a creature in there? Like you just don't know, right? And I had no idea where the movie was going at that point, to then see like the schoolgirl that disappeared in the alley dead the next morning on the balcony. It's like, what? Like, oh, that poor civilian, that random girl, like was, for a second I thought she was a trap. Like when I first saw that scene, I was like, oh my goodness, like the son is gonna get kidnapped or something, or like she's baiting him into going into the alleyway. And then to find out that she isn't some no-name civilian, she is someone involved in this like intricate blackmail scheme, but she also is trying to take care of her like her grandma, but she's also like she's doing immoral things for a cause that she thinks is good, but also she's taking care of someone that's kind of a horrible person too. Like her grandma's a wild drunk.
Yeah.
Right.
I love that scene at the funeral where the grandma like throws the rice wine everywhere and then like tosses the bottle off the thing. Yeah. It's awesome.
That's such a beautiful shot though, where she like throws it and then it's just that wide of like the balcony she's standing by. And even like all the scenes with the grandma are awesome. Yeah. The scene with her like getting the flashlight on her face, like it's like some scary move. I don't know. That's like you feel like you're in some horror movie again, where she's like flashing the light on this scary, wild-eyed old woman, right? Like it's just like, oh my goodness, what is happening, you know? But yeah, the girl character who ends up getting the schoolgirl character who ends up getting murdered, she has depth that really expands. Yeah, I think maybe, I guess it's not just Mother, it's her too. There's a lot of characters that have growth in the film, and it's not the characters you expect to have growth, right? You expect to find out, like you expect that Don Jun's friend or whatever, you expect him to have a lot more mystery uncovered about him, but he turns out to be a side character, right? Like you were saying, red herring, right? Like he's just a distraction. It doesn't matter. So yeah, this movie's awesome. I think it's really good.
I agree.
I love that it feels so approachable. One of the criticisms that Jules had watching it is that she felt it was really slow. And I actually think that this movie could have benefited from a shorter runtime. I know that there's a lot packed in there, but it also, I don't know. I felt like 2 hours was just a little long for it, and I don't know why. I think there's a lot of scenes where, like we were just talking about, the scene where the grandma throws the rice, like the rice liquor off the balcony or whatever, that stone balcony. The shot just sits there for like 3, 4, 5 seconds, and then it's just like a wild cut. This movie has wild cuts. Like it goes from like one scene, all of a sudden we're with another character in a completely different place that's not introduced at all, and you're supposed to follow it, right? Which I like. I'm like, oh, it's kind of moving quick, but yet it's not moving, and it's pausing in moments that are just like, are we gonna cut? Like that. I think some of the editing could have shaved it down a little bit. I thought that it was quirky just because it was a foreign film, so maybe that excuses it. I still think that this movie is really engaging. I think that maybe I just, watching it with Jules, she was like really antsy, and then there were dogs barking and stuff. I was like, what is happening? And it just felt like the movie wasn't moving, although there was still a lot happening. So Cameron, do you think that this movie's too long? You think I'm wrong in the way that I'm talking about it? Or
no, I don't think it's too long, just considering how, you want a little time to breathe with all of the information that you get, right? Like I love that, even though that scene in the best friend's house where she's like hiding in the closet or whatever, like it doesn't necessarily come out to anything, but you kind of want those sequences because it gives more depth to her journey, and it leads you on in a certain way, and it keeps you guessing. And like you said, you thought that you totally had it locked in, but you had no idea what was going on through that, and then, the reveal of, oh, it's just lipstick and whatnot. I don't think it necessarily holds too long on things either. I like that it kind of does that because it feels kind of jarring, and it makes you uneasy a little bit. So I'd say the editing is effective in that it makes you kind of, it still leaves you guessing. And even, there's that amazing sequence where it shows, the whole thing of what happened. It shows the whole shot of, Do-jun, following the girl and whatever else. It's the big reveal shot. And it's like kind of intercut with the story at the Junkman's. And you almost forget that you didn't see the end of that conversation. You didn't see the end of what happened. You just saw him kind of turn, and you forget because that's kind of how the movie is edited.
Right.
It's edited to sort of disorient you and kind of jump around to different things. But it's also like, that's part of the red herring, that's part of, of what, the structure of the editing is actually kind of what helps it reveal later on. And so I think there's an effectiveness in that. And I don't mind, that things are kind of unusually paced, because it makes you think about certain things and not think about other things that you might want to think deeper about, I guess.
Right.
So it leads you on in a certain way. So I like that about the movie, but I could see why some people, I don't think it's too long. That's the thing, but I could see why some people would be annoyed by that. But
yeah, I think this movie is extremely unique. Again, like I said at the beginning of this episode, I feel like as a foreign film, it pulls things from Hollywood that actually make it just easier to watch, and it is in and of itself like purely like in that culture, right? I think that's what I liked about it. It was like it used important pieces of American culture, but it didn't, like, it wasn't a slave to them, but it also like again, like I felt like who the director who made this movie like likes American cinema but made his own movie, you know, and that was a cool like experience to watch something different that wasn't like we're so different than American cinema, like for the, you know, the French, whatever they're gosh, you know, not a big fan of French film, but yeah, this movie's great. Let's get to rating, Cameron, because we're running a little over at this point.
Yeah, I think this movie is for everyone. In my mind, like I think anybody. I think you put it well that like someone who's not that interested in foreign movies, even you know, you don't even have to have that big of a knowledge of movies necessarily. If you're kind of interested just generally in mystery, and I think most people are, honestly, but if you're interested in mystery and suspense and that kind of thing, like, this is a great movie. Like I think anybody can have fun with this premise, and yeah, to me, the things that it's commenting on and the things that it's doing are universal. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's for me. I'm gonna label it as for like casuals because we do for everyone, casuals, curious, and cinephiles. I think there are some barriers into this for this movie. Like, I don't think I can sit down with absolutely everyone and watch this film without a little bit of explanation. I thought it was a massive benefit for me to watch this film expecting it to be really out there and then only appreciating the bits that were out there. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like I knew I was getting into a foreign film that was going to be different. And I would hope that everyone that watches this film had that same mindset. And there's the language barrier, right? So you're going to be reading subtitles. I think that it's hard for me to recommend a foreign movie for everyone because I think it has helped me this podcast has helped me so much when it comes to watching movies that are different. You know, I almost take that knowledge for granted, but I haven't forgotten what it was like for me to watch movies before this podcast. So I think it's hard for me to be like, everyone can watch this movie when, you know, a year ago I would have been like, subtitles, I'm gone, you know, like I couldn't do it, you know? But I think it's really close for me to being for everyone. And I think that's the highest praise I can give it. It's totally worth watching. I'm just going to put it out there. Like, it's totally worth watching. So if you have an interest, the slightest, barely the smallest interest in some sort of foreign movie, I would say check this out. Now, Parasite did win a bunch of awards, Cameron. Like, do you think Parasite is a better foreign film? Or even Snowpiercer, which I've seen and it's in English, is that even considered like a foreign film, you know?
I wouldn't consider it a foreign movie, no. But, I mean, I think, you know, it's part of Bong Joon Ho's repertoire. So I wouldn't say it, like, doesn't count, but it's made by an American studio. It's made in Hollywood. So, you know, it's not necessary. It's not really a foreign film. But Parasite, no, I think Mother is his best movie, I would say. It just in that it's running on all cylinders and it's just so good. And the fact that it's underrated, that I think maybe that's why I lean towards it. Because nobody knows about this movie. Nobody's heard of it. Nobody really cares about it. And I'm the only one, literally like the only one proselytizing how good this movie is. And and it's kind of a shame because, like, you know, everybody, well, it's not a shame. Obviously, it's great that Bong Joon Ho is successful and people are recognizing him. That's awesome. But everybody was like, "Oh yeah, did you see Parasite? It's so good. It's by who's this director? Bong Joon Ho? Oh, he did Snowpiercer." And I'm like, "Yeah, but like he's got great movies like before this." And
yeah,
you know, I feel like the token hipster.
Well, I will say, you know, if you liked Snowpiercer and then like you followed into that with Parasite, I haven't seen Parasite, but I have seen Snowpiercer. I agree with. I mean, like, I liked Snowpiercer, but I think this movie's better than Snowpiercer.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, 100%.
And so, like, if you've seen those two films, like, definitely explore this one. I think it's fantastic for what it is. I don't have much else to say about this movie. I think I really wish that we could have dived into some of the cultural comments in this film, but I think that we just don't understand Korean language. So,
I will say there is one kind of fun fact about that is the phonetic. I don't really understand it because again I don't know Korean, but apparently there are phonetic similarities between mother and murder in the Korean language, and so that kind of gives you a hint on the title as well. So
yeah, see, like that
kind
of stuff. Yeah. I feel like there's so much more to this movie that I'm just never gonna understand. I wish I could talk to someone Korean who's seen it that understands the language, like almost, and even the culture too, right? Like that could like say, oh yeah, this director, like he's saying all this cool stuff about, our culture and everything. I don't know, like that. There was a hunger for that in watching it as well. So, well, Cameron, we're starting off the month well. I'm excited to see where it goes. I'm sure there's going to be some painful stuff in it, but
no, there's not. There's just going to be greatness.
I really I don't think that there's any other besides French cinema and some Italian cinema, which I like the spaghetti western things that we've watched. We haven't really explored any other cultures' movies. Right?
Not really. No. Yeah. It is a goal of mine in the, upcoming next year of the podcast to do more foreign cinema, but I wanted to give you kind of a baseline as well. So, I think, Korean cinema is super easy and engaging and fun. And, that quote that I said yesterday about, Korean cinema is the cinema of the extreme. That's actually a Bong Joon Ho quote. So, it's something that he takes to heart. Although I would say Park Chan-wook probably is a little bit more extreme than he is. So,
well, I didn't see any skateboards or BMX bikes or anything like that, so I'm a little confused.
Yeah.
But no, I'm excited to see what's next. Definitely. If we can even rent some of this stuff, Cameron, I'm not buying a VPN just to watch some of these things. Like,
yeah, I bought it's so weird. Old Boy, it used to be like on Netflix, it was totally like accessible, and now apparently it's not at all. Like it's not even streaming anywhere. So
wow.
I bought the Blu-ray, and we can decide if we want to do that as a commentary. I think it would probably be fun as a commentary.
Okay.
But if you want to do that like next week, or if you want to we can decide if we want to do something else. But yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll figure it out. Cameron, thank you so much for your time and setting up this month. Do you want to give people maybe a heads up of the other movies coming up, or you want to keep it a secret?
Secret.
Okay, it's a secret. We post every Monday, so thank you guys for listening, and make sure to tune in next week. Thank you. Cinema Spectator is an ECFS Productions podcast that is fully funded on Patreon.com. Shout out to our producers, Darren O'Neill and Tim Smith, for supporting the show, and to the rest of you that support us at patreon.com/ECFS Productions. If you want to learn more about the benefits you can get, check out our Patreon. The show cannot happen without you great listeners, so we thank you for all your kindness and support.